You ever notice how we live in a world full of rules that absolutely make no sense? I mean, we're surrounded by them. Invisible lines drawn by people who've been dead for hundreds of years, and somehow we still obey them like they're sacred scripture. Every part of life has rules. At work, at school, even in your own home. And most of them exist for no reason other than to keep you quiet and comfortable. Let's start with one of my favorites. Don't question authority. Oh yeah, that's a classic. You're born, you grow up, and right away they tell you, listen to your teachers, obey your boss, respect your government, salute the flag, and don't ask too many questions, because if you do, they'll call you difficult. That's the polite way of saying, you might be smarter than we want you to be. Then there's the rule about always following the rules. Isn't that funny? The people making the rules don't even follow them. Politicians lie, bankers cheat, corporations pollute, and we're told to recycle our soda cans to save the planet. Yeah, right. Like that'll fix it. And how about dress codes? You can't wear a hat inside, can't wear jeans to work, can't show tattoos, because apparently fabric determines your intelligence level. They'll tell you dress for success, but what they really mean is dress like everyone else so you don't scare us. And school, oh, that's where the nonsense begins early. Sit still. Don't speak out of turn. Memorize useless facts. And whatever you do, don't think differently. Because thinking differently means you might not fit in, and we can't have that. The system isn't built for thinkers. It's built for obedient little drones who can color inside the lines and punch a time card without asking why. Then we grow up and suddenly there's a rule for everything, how to talk, how to act, even how to feel. They tell you, don't be angry, don't be sad, don't complain, but if you're happy all the time, you're weird too. It's like society wants you emotionally neutral. Just awake enough to spend money and tired enough not to notice what's going on. Here's my favorite one. You must be productive. Productive for who exactly? Most people spend their lives making money for somebody else, following rules written by someone who's never met them. But if you dare to slow down, take a breath, or God forbid, enjoy life, suddenly you're lazy. See, the truth is, most rules aren't made to protect you. They're made to control you, to keep you in line, to stop you from realizing that you don't need their permission to live your life. So maybe the real rule should be this. Don't believe every rule you're given. Question them. Challenge them. Break a few if you have to. Because the moment you stop following nonsense rules, you start living by your own. And that's when you're finally free. Most rules are about control, not protection. You ever notice that? The rules they tell you are for your safety, for your well-being, somehow always end up keeping someone else in charge. They sell it to you like it's a favor. We're doing this to protect you. But what they really mean is, we're doing this so you don't get too free, too smart, or too powerful. That's how the game works. From the day you're born, you're taught to listen to the people who made the rules, not question them, not understand them, just follow. And if you ever stop and ask why, they look at you like you've broken a sacred law of the universe. You ever think about who writes these rules? It's never the people living under them. No, it's always the ones sitting in high places, far away from the consequences. Politicians, bureaucrats, the experts. They sit in big rooms, sign papers, and decide what you can and can't do, then walk away untouched. You break a rule, you pay the price. They break a rule, they get a raise. That's not protection, that's control. They make rules to keep you in a pattern. Go to school, get a job, pay. Taxes, retire, die, and they tell you it's the right way to live. But who decided that's right? It's right for them. The people collecting the taxes, the ones who own the jobs, the ones who profit from your routine. The rules are designed to make you think you're safe, while they quietly make sure you're predictable. A safe society is an easy society to manage. That's why they love their rules. Not because it helps you, but because it helps them sleep at night knowing you won't wake up and start asking the wrong questions. Take the workplace, for example. You've got all these policies about behavior, dress code, attitude, be respectful, be professional, follow protocol. What it really means is don't make waves. If you point out something unfair, suddenly you're negative. If you question why the boss gets paid 10 times more for doing less work, you're not a team player. And if you dare to challenge the way things are done, they'll say you've got a bad attitude. You see how it works? The rule isn't protecting you. It's protecting the structure that keeps them comfortable. The same thing happens in schools. They call it discipline. Sit down, be quiet, raise your hand, ask permission to go to the bathroom. It's not about teaching you how to learn. It's about teaching you how to obey. They say it's for order, but it's really training. They're preparing you to follow orders for the rest of your life. That's why they reward the kids who memorize and punish the ones who think. The thinker is a problem. The memorizer is an asset. That's the kind of protection they want. Protection from ideas. Even outside those institutions, rules shape your daily life in ways you don't even notice. You drive at a certain speed, you speak a certain way, you act polite even when you don't feel like it. You wear certain clothes to certain places because it's respectful. You stand when they play the anthem, even if you don't believe in what it represents. And if you don't, people look at you like you've insulted their grandmother. It's all control disguised as morality. They make you believe that following the rule makes you a good person. That's the trick. They don't just want your obedience, they want your belief. And look how they use fear to keep you in line. Every rule is backed by some kind of threat. Do this or else you'll go to jail or lose your job or get judged or be outcast. They say it's for your own good, but your own good shouldn't come with punishment, should it? That's not protection, that's conditioning. When people fear punishment, they stop thinking. They just obey. That's when control becomes invisible. When you don't even need a chain because the fear does the job for you. They even make rules about how you should think. You're supposed to believe certain things, support certain causes, and keep certain opinions to yourself. They call it being decent, but what it really means is don't question the narrative. The rules of conversation, of politics, of morality, they're all filters that decide who gets to speak and who gets silenced. And they always say it's to keep peace or avoid conflict. But peace without truth isn't peace. It's just quiet control. And when you follow all the rules, what do you get? A pat on the head. Good citizen. You pay your bills on time. You vote. You obey traffic laws. You keep your voice down. You don't rock the boat. You've done everything they told you to. And somehow you're still tired, broke, and waiting for a break that never comes. That's the moment you realize the rules weren't made to help you win. They were made to keep you playing, because as long as you play, someone else profits. But when you start breaking those useless rules, when you stop caring about what they'll think, stop trying to fit into their system, that's when they panic. They call you rebellious, dangerous, irresponsible. They say you're ruining society, because deep down, they know that one person who thinks freely is contagious. Freedom spreads. That's why they spend so much time convincing you that breaking rules is wrong. It's not about chaos. It's about control slipping through their fingers. You see, real protection doesn't come from rules. It comes from understanding, awareness, and respect. Things that can't be forced. You can't legislate morality, you can't enforce compassion, and you can't create safety through fear. But control, that's easy. You just give people enough comfort and enough punishment to keep them in check. You don't need chains when the mind is already tied up. So when they tell you the rules are there to protect you, remember who's holding the pen that wrote them. Because it's never the poor, the working class, the dreamers, or the thinkers. It's always the ones who benefit from your obedience. They'll say it's about safety, but it's really about keeping the machine running smoothly. And you're the gear. The best kind of control is the kind that feels like protection. You thank the hand that keeps you in the cage, thinking it's saving you from the outside world, when in reality, it's saving itself from you. And that's the ultimate irony. The people enforcing the rules don't even live by them. The politicians break laws daily. The rich cheat the system. The corporations bend every regulation until it snaps. But they'll still tell you to play by the book. And if you don't, they'll remind you who wrote the book and who owns the printing press. Authority fears critical thinking. That's the one truth you can test anywhere on earth, at any point in history, and it'll still hold up. The people in charge don't want thinkers. They want followers. They want believers. Because a person who thinks for themselves can't be controlled easily. They ask questions. They challenge the system. They see through the illusions. And that scares authority more than anything. Power doesn't crumble from riots or rebellions. It crumbles from awareness. One person thinking clearly is more dangerous to authority than 1,000 shouting in the streets, because awareness spreads quietly, like a virus that no system can cure. From the moment you're born, they start conditioning you to respect authority. You're told that the teacher is right, even when they're wrong. The police are right, even when they lie. The government is right, even when they're corrupt. You're not supposed to see the flaws. You're supposed to memorize the slogans. You grow up saluting flags, reciting pledges, and singing songs you never chose, all to make sure you believe in something before you understand it. That's how control begins. Not with force, but with programming. The goal isn't to make you afraid of power, it's to make you trust it. Schools are the first factories of obedience. They reward the kids who repeat and punish the kids who wonder. They don't teach you how to think, they teach you what to think. A student who questions too much becomes a problem child. A student who memorizes and obeys gets Student of the Month. That's not education, that's domestication. They train you to sit down, stay quiet, follow instructions, and compete with your peers. It's a perfect rehearsal for adult life, where you'll sit in an office, stay quiet, follow orders, and compete with your coworkers. The system doesn't want independent thinkers. It wants reliable workers. And that's exactly what authority fears, unreliability. A critical thinker is unpredictable. They don't fall for propaganda. They don't swallow fear easily, and they're hard to manipulate. You can't sell them false hope or empty patriotism because they see the strings behind the puppet. They know that most of what authority says is designed to keep you loyal, not free. And once you start thinking that way, once you start noticing how much of your world runs on lies and labels, you stop being useful to them. You're no longer part of the crowd they can steer with fear and slogans. You become an outlier, and authority hates outliers. That's why every system attacks critical thought. Religion calls it blasphemy. Politics calls it rebellion. Corporations call it insubordination. Schools call it disruption. Families even call it disrespect. Every power structure has its own word for stop thinking that way. Because the moment you see through the illusion, the moment you start connecting the dots, you become harder to control. And when too many people start doing that, the whole structure shakes. That's why they spend billions on media, education, and advertising. Not to inform you, but to keep your mind too distracted to notice what's really going on. Look at how they flood your life with noise. News channels screaming about fear, politicians arguing over nonsense, celebrities distracting you with drama. It's all designed to keep you reacting, not thinking. Critical thinking requires silence, time to reflect, to analyze, to question. But they don't want silence, they want chaos. Because in chaos, you look for someone to lead you. And that's when they step in, offering comfort, safety, and a set of pre-approved answers. They give you an opinion and tell you it's your own. They feed you their truth, and you defend it as if you discovered it yourself. That's not freedom, that's managed thought. And you can see it in how people treat anyone who dares to think differently. If you question a politician, you're unpatriotic. If you question a religion, you're lost. If you question the media, you're crazy. They make sure you're punished not by the authorities themselves, but by your peers. That's how you know control is working perfectly. When people police each other's thoughts, you don't need guards when the prisoners guard each other. The best form of control is self-enforced, and the easiest way to make people do it is to convince them they're right. Authority thrives on division because thinking unites. If people started thinking critically, they'd see how much they actually have in common. They'd see that the same people who profit from their labor profit from their anger too. That every system of power feeds off separation, race, class, religion, politics. keep them divided, and they'll never question the hands moving the pieces. But if people started seeing through the game, if they started thinking instead of reacting, the illusion would fall apart. That's why authority can't afford thinkers. They don't need revolutions. They need reflection, because revolutions can be crushed. Reflection can't. The truth is, authority doesn't fear violence. It fears understanding. Violence can be contained, redirected, even used to justify more control. But understanding spreads invisibly. Once someone sees the truth behind authority's mask, they can't unsee it. And once enough people see it, authority becomes unnecessary. You can't control a population that doesn't believe in your power anymore. That's why they go after thinkers first. Philosophers, writers, comedians, journalists, the people who say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Those are the ones who disappear, get censored, or are turned into villains. It's not because they're dangerous with weapons, it's because they're dangerous with words. And words are the most powerful thing there is. Words shape perception, and perception shapes reality. Authority controls language to control thought. They decide what words are acceptable, what ideas are off limits. They create euphemisms to hide the truth, collateral damage instead of killed civilians, economic growth instead of exploitation, national security instead of control. They twist language until it loses meaning. And once words lose meaning, thinking becomes impossible. George Orwell wasn't giving a warning. He was describing the manual. So when you think critically, you're not just asking questions, you're reclaiming your mind. You're taking back the ability to see the world without filters. It's not easy. It's uncomfortable. Thinking critically means realizing that the people you trusted might be lying, that the systems you believed in might be corrupt, that the comfort you felt was built on manipulation. That's a hard pill to swallow. And most people would rather stay comfortable than be free. That's why critical thinkers are lonely sometimes. But they're also the freest people alive. Authority fears critical thinkers because they don't fit into the machinery. They don't follow the pattern. They don't need permission to exist. They don't need validation from titles or ranks. And most importantly, they don't confuse obedience with morality. They understand that being good and being compliant are not the same thing. Authority depends on people believing that rules equal righteousness, that following the system makes you virtuous. But a thinker knows better. They know that morality lives outside law, truth lives outside authority, and freedom lives outside obedience. So authority will always fear those who think, not because they cause chaos, but because they cause clarity. Clarity is the end of illusion, and illusion is the foundation of every empire ever built. A clear mind can't be ruled, it can only be respected. And authority doesn't know how to respect what it can't control. Social norms like dress codes and professionalism are illusions, carefully constructed masks to make control look respectable. They're not about decency or discipline, they're about conformity. You ever notice how society loves to talk about individuality, yet everywhere you go you're told how to dress, how to talk, how to behave? They tell you to be yourself, but the moment you actually are, someone's there to remind you you're breaking the rules. That's because the system isn't built to handle authenticity. It's built to manage appearances. As long as you look the part, no one cares what's happening underneath. Take the idea of professionalism. Sounds noble, right? Being professional means you're competent, serious, respectable. But somewhere along the way, it stopped meaning good at your job and started meaning act like a robot. You can't speak freely. You can't express emotion. You can't show frustration. You have to wear the uniform of obedience, the polite smile, the neutral tone, the clothes that say, I fit in. The whole concept was never about improving work. It was about controlling workers. Because once you teach people to act professional, you've taught them to suppress their humanity for the comfort of the system. Look at the dress codes. We've been tricked into believing that fabric defines intelligence. A suit and tie makes you trustworthy, jeans make you lazy, tattoos make you unprofessional, and blue hair makes you unemployable. These are the rules of an image-obsessed society that values presentation over principle. It's not about what you can do, it's about what you look like while doing it. People will trust a man in a tie who lies to their face before they'll trust a guy in a hoodie who tells them the truth. That's how deep the illusion runs. And what's the reason they give for all this nonsense? It creates a professional environment. Translation, we don't want to see anything that challenges our idea of normal. They'll tell you to cover up tattoos because they're distracting. You know what's really distracting? Hypocrisy. A company will proudly talk about diversity, inclusion, and self-expression, then tell you to hide the parts of yourself that don't fit their brochure. They want diversity of appearance, not diversity of thought. They want a colorful workforce that all thinks in grayscale. Even outside the workplace, the illusion follows you. Go to a fancy restaurant without dressing up, and you're out of place. Walk into a corporate meeting with the wrong shoes, and you're judged before you open your mouth. Society built an entire hierarchy based on fabric, labels, and stitching. Expensive clothing means status. Cheap clothing means struggle. And yet, none of that fabric makes a person more intelligent, kind, or capable. The suit doesn't make the man. It just makes him invisible in a crowd of other suits. The illusion goes deeper than clothing. It's in the way we talk. Professional language is just another costume. You can't say what you mean. You have to say it in a way that sounds appropriate. You can't say this is stupid. You have to say, I have some concerns about the current strategy. You can't say I'm tired. You have to say, I'm managing my workload. Every word is polished, scrubbed, and sterilized until it's meaningless. The goal isn't communication, it's concealment. Professional speech is designed to hide emotion, avoid blame, and protect hierarchies. That's why so many meetings happen where everyone talks for an hour and says absolutely nothing. It's not a bug in the system. It's the system working perfectly. And yet, people defend it. They say, you have to be professional. It's about respect. But respect isn't wearing a suit. Respect is listening, honesty, integrity. A person can wear a $3,000 suit and treat people like garbage, and somehow they're still professional. Meanwhile, someone in ripped jeans who speaks truthfully gets labeled as disrespectful. That's how backward it is. Society has confused manners with morality, appearance with value, obedience with competence. You see this everywhere, in offices, schools, politics, even social media. The more someone looks put together, the more we trust them. The more raw and real someone is, the more we question them. It's like we've been trained to fear authenticity. A clean image is comforting because it hides the mess. But life is messy. People are messy. The illusion of professionalism tries to erase that mess, to pretend that control equals order. But all it really does is suppress truth. And that suppression cost people their freedom. You can't be creative if you're worried about how you look. You can't be honest if you're scared of sounding unprofessional. You can't be human if you're constantly editing yourself to fit someone else's definition of acceptable. That's why so many workplaces feel lifeless, because everyone's pretending. They're all putting on a show, keeping up appearances, speaking in a language that doesn't belong to them. And the sad part is they start to believe it's normal. They start thinking that professionalism is who they are, not who they were trained to be. This obsession with image extends to success itself. We've been taught that success has a look: the office, the suit, the car, the perfect smile. You can be miserable inside, but as long as you look successful, the world applauds you. People spend their whole lives chasing that image, thinking they're climbing a ladder, when in reality they're just walking in circles, following the rules of appearance. And when someone breaks those rules, shows up as themselves unpolished, real, the system treats them like a threat, because authenticity can't be managed. It exposes the lie. Think about the irony. Society celebrates originality but punishes individuality. We worship innovators, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Einstein, but only after they're successful. Before that, they were the weird ones, the rule breakers, the unprofessional people who didn't fit the mold. Once they make it big, suddenly their nonconformity becomes genius. But while they're struggling, it's rebellion. That's how the system works. It only loves originality once it's profitable. Until then, it's just inconvenient. The same illusion applies to gender, culture, and class. Professional has always meant Western, male, upper class. A natural hairstyle can be called unprofessional. An accent can be labeled uneducated. Clothing from another culture can be inappropriate. These rules were never neutral. They were designed to enforce a single standard of what power looks like. It's not about order, it's about exclusion. The closer you look like those in charge, the more professional you appear. That's why it's an illusion. It's not about ability, it's about imitation. And this illusion keeps people divided. It creates invisible walls between the so-called refined and the unrefined. It gives some people unearned credibility and strips others of it before they even speak. It tells us to respect the costume, not the character. But when everyone's wearing the same costume, it becomes impossible to tell who's real. The system survives because people mistake polish for truth, performance for value, and control for respect. So when you peel back the layers, professionalism isn't about doing good work. It's about maintaining comfort. It's about making sure no one rocks the boat. No one stands out too much, and everyone plays their part in the grand theater of appearances. The ties, the titles, the polite smiles, they're all props. The real show is conformity, and the moment someone stops acting, the illusion breaks. That's why it's dangerous to be real in a world that worships appearances, because when you stop pretending, you remind everyone else that they have been pretending too. Education often discourages creativity. It's strange, isn't it? We send kids to school to learn how to think, but most of what they learn is how not to think. The system doesn't want minds that question, challenge, or create. It wants minds that comply. From the moment a child enters a classroom, they're introduced to a world of rules, structures, and grades that slowly chip away at their natural curiosity. Children are born curious, creative, and fearless. They ask why about everything, but by the time they graduate, most of them have stopped asking. They've learned that the safest answer isn't why, it's yes. The education system is like a factory. It takes in unique, imaginative minds and tries to mold them into one identical shape. Sit down, be quiet, raise your hand, follow instructions. You're told exactly what to learn, when to learn it, and how to show that you've learned it. There's no room for exploration, no space for self-discovery. You're taught that success comes from memorizing the right answers, not from asking the right questions. And the tragedy is, most people never realize that this isn't education, it's indoctrination. Think about how schools measure intelligence. They use tests that reward memorization and punish imagination. You can get an A by remembering what's in the textbook, but you'll fail if you try to think beyond it. If you repeat the teacher's opinion, you're smart. If you challenge it, you're disruptive. The system doesn't reward thinkers, it rewards repeaters. It trains students to conform, not to create, because conformity is easy to manage. Creativity is unpredictable, and systems hate unpredictability. The real thinkers, the ones who change the world, they never fit in at school. Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, all of them struggled in traditional education. Why? Because they refused to trade curiosity for compliance. They didn't care about grades, they cared about ideas. But schools aren't built for people like that. Schools are built for efficiency, not enlightenment. The goal isn't to produce thinkers. It's to produce workers. Workers who will follow orders, meet deadlines, and never question the system that controls them. Look at the structure of a typical school day. Bells tell you when to start, when to stop, when to eat, when to leave. You sit in rows, facing forward, listening to one authority figure who decides what's important. It's not education. It's training for factory life. It's a rehearsal for adulthood where you'll trade one bell for another, one supervisor for another, one grade for a paycheck. And you'll keep following the rules, not because you believe in them, but because you've been taught that rules are the path to safety. Creativity, on the other hand, is dangerous to this structure. Creativity asks, what if? It challenges assumptions. It rewrites rules. That's why it's treated like a hobby, not a skill. Art, music, drama, they're called extracurricular. Extra, as if imagination is something optional, something you can do when you finish the real work. But what's more real than the ability to think freely? Every great invention, every social movement, every breakthrough started with a creative idea. Yet those are the very things our schools push to the side. And when creativity does show up, it's graded. Be original, but not too original. Be creative, but follow the rubric. It's the same paradox everywhere. Schools talk about innovation, but only within limits. They want you to color outside the lines as long as it's in the approved section of the page. That's not creativity. That's conformity with better marketing. The world doesn't need students who know how to pass tests. It needs people who know how to think. But thinking doesn't fit on a standardized answer sheet. The irony is, kids don't need to be taught creativity. They already have it. Watch any 5-year-old play, and you'll see a mind that can turn a stick into a sword, a blanket into a castle, a box into a spaceship. They don't need permission to imagine. But by the time that same child is 15, they're afraid to give the wrong answer. They've learned that imagination is risky, that being wrong is embarrassing, and so they stop experimenting, they stop questioning, they stop imagining. The school didn't fail to teach them creativity. It successfully taught them fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of standing out. That's what kills creativity faster than anything. Schools are obsessed with perfection, the right answers, the correct formulas, the approved opinions. But creativity lives in mistakes. It thrives in uncertainty. It grows from curiosity. You can't teach creativity in an environment that punishes risk. Yet that's exactly what education does. It tells kids that being wrong is bad instead of showing them that failure is how you learn. Imagine if we taught children that every mistake was a clue instead of a crime. We'd have a generation of inventors instead of imitators. And then we wonder why adults are so afraid to take chances. They've spent 12 years being trained not to. They've been rewarded for obedience, not originality. By the time they enter the real world, most people have learned to suppress their creative instincts. They choose safe jobs, safe ideas, safe lives. They think they're being responsible, but really they're just continuing the same cycle of compliance that started in the classroom. It's not that they lost their creativity, it's that it was conditioned out of them. Even the language of education reflects control. Curriculum, standardized, assessment, everything sounds mechanical. Nothing about it suggests discovery or passion. The system treats students like products, not people. Each one must meet specifications, achieve targets, and pass quality checks. But creativity doesn't work like that. It doesn't follow schedules or standards. It comes from curiosity, chaos, and freedom. All the things the education system avoids. And then there's the grading system, perhaps the biggest enemy of creativity. One letter decides your worth. One number defines your intelligence. Imagine telling an artist their painting is a B+. It makes no sense. But that's what education does. It quantifies the unquantifiable. It teaches kids that their value comes from external approval, not inner understanding. And once you learn that lesson, it follows you for life. You start living for validation, not inspiration. You stop creating because you love it and start performing because you're being watched. The saddest part is that most teachers don't want it this way. Many of them care deeply about creativity, but they're trapped in a system that doesn't allow it. They're forced to teach to the test, follow the curriculum, meet performance goals. They can't encourage exploration because the system doesn't reward it. The problem isn't the teachers, it's the structure. It's a machine that values efficiency over enlightenment. Every generation talks about reforming education, but reform isn't enough. You can't fix a system designed for control by making it slightly more comfortable. The problem isn't that it's broken, it's that it's working exactly as intended. It produces compliant citizens who follow rules, respect authority, and consume without questioning. True education would create people who question power, seek truth, and build something better. But those people are hard to control, so the system doesn't make many of them. If creativity were truly valued, schools would look completely different. They'd be places where curiosity mattered more than correctness, where exploration was rewarded, and where mistakes were celebrated as steps toward discovery. Learning would be a journey, not a checklist. Teachers would be mentors, not managers. Students would create, not compete. But that world threatens the one we live in, a world that depends on predictable people doing predictable things. So education keeps doing what it's always done, producing conformity and calling it success. And most people go through life thinking that's normal, never realizing that their most powerful tool, their imagination, was dulled before they ever had a chance to use it. Freedom begins when you question nonsense. That's the truth nobody in power wants you to realize. Real freedom isn't about waving a flag, paying your taxes, or saying you live in a free country. It's about the ability to think for yourself, to look at all the nonsense you've been told, all the rules you've been taught to follow, and say, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. The moment that thought appears, that flicker of doubt, that small whisper in your mind, that's where freedom starts. Because questioning is the act that breaks the spell. Most people don't live freely. They live obediently. They confuse routine for stability, conformity for safety, and silence for peace. They go through life following invisible scripts that were written long before they were born. Go to school, get a job, get married, have kids, buy a house, retire quietly, and die politely. And if you dare to deviate, they call you a failure. They don't say you're lost. They say you're not normal. But what's so great about normal? Normal is just the collective name for all the nonsense we've agreed to believe in. Freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want. That's chaos. Freedom comes from understanding what's real and what's ridiculous. It comes from peeling away the layers of lies and expectations that society stacks on you from birth. You're told what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, and what you're supposed to care about. You're taught to chase approval instead of purpose, image instead of truth. The moment you stop chasing those illusions, you start reclaiming your life. You can see how deep the nonsense runs. People believe that working themselves into exhaustion makes them virtuous, that buying things they don't need makes them valuable, that pleasing people who don't care about them makes them lovable. It's madness disguised as morality. Society feeds you these rules and then punishes you if you don't follow them. Don't speak too loud. Don't. Question authority. Don't be too different. Don't make people uncomfortable. But all progress, all truth, all real humanity begins with discomfort. The world doesn't change because people obey. It changes because someone, somewhere, finally says, that's stupid. I'm not doing it anymore. The irony is that questioning nonsense doesn't make you rebellious. It makes you sane. Because look around. So much of what we call normal life is absurd when you think about it. We measure worth by money, intelligence by degrees, beauty by filters, and success by followers. We've built an entire civilization based on appearances, not substance. And we wonder why people feel lost, anxious, and hollow. It's because they're living by rules that make no sense to their soul. They're following scripts that lead nowhere. The system doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It just wants you functional. When you start questioning, everything changes. You begin to see the cracks in the foundation. You realize that most of the rules you follow aren't laws of nature. They're human inventions. Someone, somewhere, decided what's appropriate, what's successful, what's moral, what's valuable, and the rest of us just played along. But when you step back and see that, it's liberating. Because if these rules were invented, they can be reinvented. And that's where your power begins. You stop caring so much about approval. You stop chasing the crowd. You stop apologizing for being different. That's what scares society. A person who doesn't need permission, because permission is control. The moment you stop asking for it, you stop being controlled. The people in charge, the politicians, corporations, religious institutions, media, they depend on your compliance. They need you to believe that you need them, but you don't. You don't need their permission to think, to question, to exist freely. Freedom isn't glamorous. It's not some heroic moment with flags waving and people cheering. It's quiet, internal, often lonely. It happens in those moments when you sit with yourself and realize you've been living someone else's life. When you see that half the things you stress about aren't even your ideas. They're borrowed worries from the world around you. The car you want, the clothes you buy, the opinions you hold. Most of it isn't truly yours. It's all part of the conditioning. Real freedom is when you start separating your voice from the noise. But questioning nonsense isn't easy. People will fight you for it. They'll say you're cynical, ungrateful, rebellious. They'll defend the nonsense because they've built their lives around it. If you expose it as meaningless, what does that say about the decades they spent following it? Most people would rather protect the lie than face the truth. They'll cling to their illusions because it's safer than rebuilding their worldview. That's why free thinkers have always been feared, mocked, or silenced. It's not because they're wrong, it's because they're inconvenient. The strange thing is that once you start seeing the nonsense, you can't unsee it. The advertisements, the political speeches, the religious preaching, the motivational slogans, all of it starts to sound the same. Empty words meant to keep you running in circles. You start realizing how much of life is built on manipulation, getting you to buy, believe, or behave in ways that serve someone else. You start noticing how fear is used to control. Fear of being poor, fear of being judged, fear of being alone, fear of being wrong. Fear keeps people quiet. Fear keeps them loyal. Questioning dissolves fear, and that's what makes it dangerous. When you question nonsense, you also start to see beauty more clearly, because you stop taking things at face value. You begin to notice the small, genuine moments that aren't part of the script. A laugh, a sunset, a deep conversation, a simple act of kindness. You realize that life's meaning isn't handed down from authority. It's created in these small, authentic moments. Freedom isn't in rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's in awareness. It's in choosing what matters to you, not what's been sold to you. And the beautiful thing about freedom is that once you find it, you don't need to convince anyone else. You stop arguing. You stop begging people to understand you. Because freedom isn't something you prove. It's something you live. You start walking lighter. You stop playing roles that don't fit you. You stop measuring your life by the nonsense standards of the world. You don't need validation anymore because you've already given it to yourself. Of course, freedom comes with a price. It's uncomfortable. It's uncertain. You lose the comfort of belonging, the illusion of safety, the approval of people who still believe in the nonsense. But what you gain is priceless, clarity, peace, authenticity. You start living with your eyes open. You make choices based on truth, not fear. You stop surviving and start living. And maybe that's the ultimate act of rebellion, not shouting, not fighting, but thinking. Seeing clearly in a world that profits from blindness. Questioning not to destroy, but to understand, because when you understand, you can no longer be controlled. That's what the system fears most. A population that thinks, questions, and refuses to play by stupid rules. Freedom doesn't arrive like a revolution. It happens in small, silent acts of awareness. The moment you stop believing the nonsense, you step outside of it. You start creating your own meaning, your own path, your own truth. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You start seeing that the world isn't something to obey, it's something to experience. And that's when you realize The real prison was never outside of you. It was built in your mind, brick, by every rule you never questioned. The day you start questioning nonsense, the walls start to crack. And through those cracks, the light of freedom finally comes in.